The email arrived at 6:12 a.m. Not with warning, not with mercy, with a smile dressed as professionalism. Due to market adjustments, your rent will increase by 40% effective next month. Next month. As if that made it kinder. In the kitchen, the house was half awake. Coffee hissed. Morning light slipped through worn curtains. The youngest tied her shoes. The father stood at the counter, phone in hand, rereading the message like the numbers might change if he stared long enough. They didn't. The mother stepped beside him, towel over shoulder. What is it? He tilted the screen. She read in silence, eyes moving line by line, calm sharpening into steel. That's not an adjustment, she said quietly. That's eviction in slow motion. The email continued, polite, cruel. If this presents hardship, you're welcome to explore other options. Welcome. The father scrolled to the signature. Full name. Professional headshot. Confident smile. At the bottom of the thread, easy to miss, sat an old forwarded attachment. A scanned checkbook page. Bank details clear. Signature visible. The mother noticed. Her lips curved, not warm, not wide. The kind of smile that arrives when reaction ends and planning begins. They think we'll panic, she said. They think we'll leave, he replied. The kids grabbed backpacks. Shoes hit the floor. Life moved on because it had to. Door closed. House quiet. Phone buzzed again. Same sender. Please confirm receipt. She looked at her husband. Confirm it, she said. He typed back. Received. Thank you. Outside, the neighborhood woke unaware. The landlord had just handed them everything they needed, and he didn't even know it. By 9 o'clock, the email had already done its work. It followed them into the day, the way bad news always does, quietly, persistently, refusing to stay in one place. The father carried it in his chest as he drove to work, hands tight on the steering wheel, eyes fixed forward. The mother carried it in her purse, folded into silence, pulled out, and reread in her head between tasks. The kids didn't know the details, but they felt the shift anyway. Children always did. At noon, the landlord replied again. Polite, efficient, smiling through text. Just a reminder that the updated lease will be sent later today. Please review promptly. Later today, as if urgency belonged to him. The mother read it during her lunch break, sitting alone in the break room with a sandwich she barely tasted. Around her, coworkers laughed, microwaves hummed, someone complained about traffic. Life continued in straight lines while hers bent sharply inward. She typed a response. Understood. One word. Neutral. Non-threatening. The kind of word people used when they didn't want anyone to know how much it hurt. That evening, the humiliation became official. The new lease arrived at 7:43 p.m., just as the kids were finishing homework at the dining table. The subject line was cheerful in a corporate way. Updated lease agreement. Please review. The father opened it on his laptop. The mother leaned over his shoulder. They read together, silently, line by line, like mourners sharing a program at a funeral. The numbers were worse than the email had suggested. New fees tucked into footnotes. Administrative costs. Market alignment charges. Language designed to look reasonable while doing unreasonable harm. At the bottom, highlighted in yellow, failure to sign within 72 hours will be interpreted as intent to vacate. The father exhaled through his nose. Slow. Controlled. That's 3 days, he said. That's not 3 days, the mother replied. That's pressure. The kids glanced up, sensing tone, if not meaning. Everything okay? The oldest asked. The mother forced a smile. Yeah, baby. Just grown-up stuff. She hated how practiced the lie sounded. Later, after the kids were in bed, the mother sat at the kitchen table and did the math. Rent, utilities, food, school expenses. The margin they'd worked so hard to protect vanished in a few taps of the calculator. They weren't reckless. They weren't late. They weren't behind. They were targeted. The landlord's name sat at the top of every document. Clean font, confident formatting. A man who had never once stepped into their home except to inspect it. A man who called their neighborhood transitional and meant disposable. The next morning, the humiliation went public. A printed notice appeared taped crookedly to their front door. Important tenant update. Please contact management. The mother stared at it for a long moment before pulling it down. The paper left behind a pale rectangle where the sun hadn't touched the door. A visible mark. a quiet announcement to anyone passing by. She folded the notice and slipped it into her bag, jaw set. At work, she couldn't focus. At school, the kids came home quieter than usual. Someone asked if we were moving. The youngest said casually, kicking off her shoes. The mother froze. "Who asked?" she said. "Just a kid. He said his mom saw a paper on our door." The humiliation tightened, found new shape. That night, the landlord called. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound apologetic. He sounded bored. "I just wanted to make sure you received everything," he said. "We have other interested parties, so timing is important." Other interested parties. As if they were already gone. "We received it," the father said evenly. "Good, good," the landlord replied. "And just to be clear, this isn't personal. It's just business." The mother watched her husband's face as he listened. The way his jaw clenched, then released. The way he nodded, even though the man on the phone couldn't see it. She took the phone from him. "We've been good tenants," she said calmly. "Never late. Never missed a payment." "Yes, and we appreciate that," the landlord said quickly. "But the market is the market." "Funny," she replied. "It never seems to move the same way for everyone." There was a pause. Brief. Instructive. "I don't want this to get uncomfortable," he said. Neither did she. But it already was. After the call ended, the house felt smaller. Walls closer. Air heavier. The mother stood at the sink longer than necessary, staring out the window at a street she suddenly felt she might lose. That night, the father opened his laptop again. Not to reread the lease. To look at the attachment. The old forwarded file from the first email. The one that didn't belong. He zoomed in. Routing numbers. Account name. Signature style. The careless curve of someone who'd never expected consequences to come from a document he'd forgotten he sent. The mother stood behind him, arms crossed. "People like him," she said quietly, "think humiliation makes you desperate." The father nodded. "They think pressure makes you sloppy." She leaned closer, eyes sharp now, mind already moving. "They think we don't know how systems work," she added. The laptop screen glowed between them. A mistake. A doorway. An opportunity. Outside, the neighborhood settled into night. Porch lights flicked on. Cars slowed. Someone laughed 2 houses down. Inside, the humiliation was still fresh. But it was no longer alone. The first thing the mother did was nothing. That was the hardest part. For 2 days, they went on living as if the lease hadn't arrived, like a quiet threat. As if the paper notice hadn't been taped to their door, as if the landlord's voice hadn't carried the casual confidence of someone used to people folding. They cooked dinner. They packed lunches. They helped with homework and reminded the kids to brush their teeth. Normalcy became a kind of camouflage, but beneath it, something heavy settled. It pressed into the hours between midnight and dawn, when sleep came in fragments. It followed the father to work, where numbers on spreadsheets blurred into something personal. It followed the mother through grocery aisles, where she began doing math automatically, subtracting, adjusting, anticipating loss. Humiliation, she realized, wasn't loud. It was administrative. It arrived as emails and deadlines and phrases like market alignment. It hid behind professionalism and asked you to smile while it rearranged your life. On the 3rd morning, the mother sat alone at the kitchen table after everyone had left. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking toward a future someone else was trying to control. She opened her laptop, not to reply to the landlord, to learn him. She typed his name into the search bar, the full name from the signature block. She added words like LLC, property management. The screen filled quickly. He wasn't careful. People like him rarely were. There were articles about local investors revitalizing underserved neighborhoods. There were photos of ribbon cuttings, his arm draped casually around city council members. There were quotes where he talked about opportunity and growth and hard decisions. There were complaints too, buried deeper. Tenant forums, anonymous posts, patterns emerging if you knew how to look. Rent hikes, short deadlines, notices taped where neighbors could see them. Pressure. She clicked deeper. The father joined her an hour later, having taken a half day without explaining why. He poured coffee, sat across from her, and watched her work. "You find anything?" he asked. She turned the laptop toward him. A spreadsheet was open now. Names, properties, dates, notes in the margins. He does this, she said simply. Over and over. The father scrolled slowly. So it's not us. It was never us. That knowledge didn't lift the weight, but shaped it. Gave it edges. Direction. Later that afternoon, the landlord sent another message. Just checking in. Have you had a chance to review? The mother didn't answer. Instead, she opened the original email again. The one from 6:12 a.m. The one that had arrived with a smile dressed as professionalism. She clicked the attachment. She'd looked at it before, but now she really looked. The scan checkbook page wasn't meant for them. It had been forwarded accidentally, part of a chain he'd reused without thinking. A small mistake, the kind powerful people made because they'd never had to pay for them. She enlarged the image. Account number, routing number, bank logo, signature. She zoomed in further. The father leaned in. You thinking what I'm thinking? I'm thinking he handed us a loaded room, she said, and assumed we wouldn't know what to do with it. They didn't rush. That was the difference. They didn't touch anything yet. They didn't test anything. They didn't leave a trace. They researched. The mother read about digital security the way she'd once read baby manuals, methodical, patient, refusing panic. The father dug into email protocols, password habits, the kinds of shortcuts men like their landlord relied on. He reuses passwords. The father said one night, voice low. Same structure. Same tells. Of course he does, the mother replied. He's never been afraid. Days passed. The kids asked again if they were moving. Not yet, the mother said honestly. The landlord escalated. A voicemail this time. Firmer. Still polite. Always polite. I need confirmation by end of day tomorrow, he said. Otherwise, I'll assume you're choosing to vacate. Choosing. The word sat wrong. That night, the mother stood at the sink again, staring out the window. The same street. The same houses. But now every light felt temporary. Every shadow uncertain. She thought about the word strategy. People confused it with aggression. But strategy wasn't about force. It was about timing. The father sat at the table, laptop open. We can get in, he said quietly. His email. Not break it. Walk in. The mother turned slowly. Can we do it without hurting anyone else? He nodded. Just him. She thought about the lease. The notice. The kids' backpacks hitting the floor. The way humiliation had seeped into their lives without permission. Then we don't rush, she said. We wait until he's careless again. They didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, an email arrived, this time clearly meant for someone else. A forwarded message chain, budget notes, payment schedules, and at the bottom, a casual line from the landlord to his accountant. Use my personal account for now. I'll switch it later. Later never came. The father looked at the mother. She closed her eyes briefly. Okay, she said. Now. What followed wasn't flashy. It was quiet, precise, clinical. They accessed his email the way you enter a room you've been invited into by accident. Careful not to touch anything unnecessary. They didn't read personal messages. They didn't browse. They went straight to what mattered. Payment records. Templates. His digital checkbook. The mother felt the weight again, but this time it wasn't pressing down. It was centering her. They drafted nothing yet. They sent nothing yet. They watched. They learned how he spoke to vendors. How he approved expenses. How casually he signed off on numbers that could change someone else's life. He's sloppy, the father whispered. He's comfortable, the mother corrected. The lease deadline passed without their signature. The landlord sent one last message, irritation leaking through the polish. This is your final notice. The mother stared at the screen. Then she opened a new window. She didn't smile. The moment didn't arrive with a surge of adrenaline. It arrived with stillness. The mother sat at the kitchen table just after midnight, the house sealed in the kind of quiet that only came once everyone else had finally surrendered to sleep. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall clicked forward, each second sounding louder than the last. Outside, a streetlight flickered, washing the window in pale orange. Her laptop rested open in front of her, screen dimmed, cursor blinking patiently, as if it understood this wasn't something to rush. Across the table, the father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes fixed not on the screen but on her. He wasn't nervous. He was watchful. There was a difference. This wasn't impulse. This was response. Weeks of pressure had funneled them here. Emails. Notices. Smiling threats dressed as procedure. Humiliation disguised as policy. All of it had compressed into this narrow moment, this quiet hour when the world assumed they were powerless and asleep. They weren't. Once, the father said quietly, breaking the silence. We do this once. She nodded without looking up. Once is all it takes. She moved her fingers to the keyboard, deliberate, unhurried. The steps were already mapped in her head. They had rehearsed this part without ever calling it rehearsal. Testing knowledge, tracing habits, learning how the landlord moved through his own systems with careless confidence. Men like him didn't guard doors. They assumed no one would try to open them. She accessed the account the way one entered a room left unlocked. Not forcing, not rushing, not touching anything unnecessary. Her breathing stayed even. Her hands didn't shake. The weight she'd carried for days didn't disappear, but it shifted, settling lower, grounding her instead of pressing down. The father watched the screen over her shoulder. There, he murmured. She saw it too. The payment interface loaded cleanly. Familiar fields. Familiar prompts. A system designed to move money without emotion. She entered the amount. Not a cent less. Not a cent more. The full month's rent, paid in advance. She paused before confirming. This was the line. On one side, fear. On the other, resolve. She clicked. The confirmation appeared almost instantly. Neat and unceremonious. A transaction ID. A timestamp. The landlord's name displayed clearly, confidently, as if he himself had authorized it, which, technically, he had. She exhaled, not a sigh of relief. A release. They logged out immediately, closed everything, cleared traces, left nothing behind except what they intended to leave behind. By the time the sky began to pale at the edges, the money was already gone. At 8:03 a.m., the landlord noticed. He noticed because his phone buzzed while he was tying his tie, the vibration sharp and insistent against the polished wood of his dresser. He frowned at the screen, irritation already forming before comprehension caught up. Fraud alert. He froze. Money had a way of doing that, cutting through confidence, halting momentum. Tenants could be ignored. Emails could be delayed. But money? Money demanded attention. He called the bank immediately. His voice was clipped, authoritative, the voice of a man accustomed to being believed. He spoke in absolutes. He insisted there had been a mistake. He used phrases like impossible and unauthorized and handle this now. The representative listened patiently. Too patiently. She explained the transaction, verified the details, confirmed the authorization. Her tone never changed. This payment was processed successfully, she said. There's no error on our end. The landlord felt heat crawl up his neck. That's my money, he snapped. I didn't approve that. There's a digital signature attached, she replied calmly. From your account. He hung up without saying goodbye. At 9:17 a.m., his inbox chimed. A message from his own system. Payment confirmed. At 9:24, another alert arrived. This one from his accounting software, clean and efficient, categorizing the transaction under tenant payments received. He stared at the screen. The mother imagined that moment later, not with glee, but with clarity. She pictured his confusion, the way certainty cracked first, followed by anger scrambling to cover it. At 9:30, his phone rang again. This time it was them. He answered on the second ring, voice tight, controlled to the point of strain. Yes. Good morning, the father said evenly. No edge. No apology. There was a pause. Who is this? You know who this is? The mother said calmly, leaning closer to the phone. Another pause. Longer now. I don't know what you think you're doing, the landlord said sharply, but this isn't funny. We agree, the father replied. That's why we're calling. Silence stretched across the line. The rent, the mother continued. We paid. He laughed once, short, incredulous. You didn't pay. I would know. You do, she said. Check your records. They could hear the shift. Papers rustling. Keys tapping. The faint echo of a keyboard on his end. His breathing changed. That's impossible, he said finally. That money came from your account. The father finished for him. Yes, we saw. The line went dead quiet. Then his voice snapped back, sharp and loud. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, the mother said. We do. This is illegal, he hissed. I'll have you out of that house by the end of the week. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush her words. What you did, she said, was predatory. What we did was respond. You think one payment changes anything? He scoffed. No, she replied. But it proves something. And what's that? He demanded. That you're not untouchable. The call ended abruptly. The aftermath came fast. Emails flooded in, formal now, aggressive, soaked in legal language meant to intimidate. Words like consequences and liability and immediate action appeared again and again. The mother read every one. She didn't reply. By noon, the bank froze the landlord's account as part of the dispute process. Standard procedure. Temporary, but devastating when your business depended on uninterrupted flow. By 1, scheduled payments bounced. Contractors called him. Vendors emailed. His phone buzzed nonstop, each vibration another crack in the smooth machine he'd built. The father checked their account. The rent was still marked as paid. Now, he said softly, he has to explain. That afternoon, the landlord abandoned professionalism entirely. He showed up, not through email, not through legal counsel. In person, he stood on their porch in a wrinkled suit, hair slightly out of place, confidence leaking out through the seams. His eyes flicked briefly to the neighbors' houses before settling on the door. The mother opened it and stepped outside, closing it behind her. You think you're clever, he said under his breath. You think you can embarrass me like this? She met his gaze steadily. You embarrassed yourself. This ends now, he said. I'll reverse it. We'll pretend none of this happened. She shook her head slowly. We're done pretending. You don't have leverage, he snapped. She reached in her bag and pulled out a folder. Printed emails, transaction records, screenshots, evidence. You forgot something, she said. Everything you do leaves a record. The color drained from his face. This isn't over, he muttered, backing away. No, she agreed calmly. It's just visible now. He left without another word. That night, the house didn't feel lighter. It felt anchored. The humiliation was still there, but it no longer owned a room. The landlord moved fast once fear replaced control. Too fast. By morning, his lawyer was emailing. Not the polished, distant kind. This one came clipped, urgent, the tone of someone pulled into a mess without warning. It referenced miscommunication, temporary measures, a desire to resolve matters amicably. No accusations yet. No threats. That came later. The mother read it twice, then handed the phone to her husband. He read it once and set it down. They're feeling the bleed, he said. She nodded. That's when they started talking. But the reckoning wasn't going to arrive through private channels. It never did for people like him. It came when the walls he relied on, systems, silence, separation, began to collapse inward. By noon, the building manager called. Not the landlord, not his lawyer, the middleman. His voice was strained, professional strain cracking under something closer to panic. He spoke quickly, apologizing without admitting fault, assuring them everything would be reviewed. The rent increase, he said, wasn't finalized. The mother let the pause stretch long enough to make him uncomfortable. It was sent, she replied calmly. That makes it real. Another apology. Another attempt to soften edges without fixing the blade. We're just asking for patience, he said. You had none for us, the father said. The call ended awkwardly. That afternoon, neighbors started talking. They always did. It began with a whisper in the laundry room, someone mentioning a bounce payment. Then another tenant noticed a delayed maintenance request. Then someone else received a revised notice correcting an error in their rent statement. The word error traveled fast. So did the truth. The mother didn't broadcast anything. She didn't need to. She only answered when asked. Calmly. Precisely. Facts only. Dates. Screenshots. A simple explanation of how the increase had arrived and how it had unraveled. People listened. Not because of drama, but because they recognized the pattern. By evening, a group chat existed. Tenants who had never spoken beyond nods in the hallway were suddenly comparing notes. Numbers didn't line up. Notices contradicted each other. Someone had received a similar increase months ago. Someone else had been pressured to leave quietly. A pattern emerged, and patterns were dangerous. At 7:42 p.m., the landlord's name appeared in a thread he hadn't been invited to. but would soon feel. By the next morning, a tenant advocacy group was involved. Not because someone was loud, because someone was organized. They asked for documentation. The mother sent it. Clean, time-stamped, unemotional. Receipts spoke louder than outrage ever could. The landlord responded the only way men like him knew how when exposed, with force. Eviction notice. Printed. Formal. Delivered by courier. The father held the envelope in his hands, feeling its weight like a challenge. The paper was thick, authoritative, designed to intimidate through texture alone. The mother read it standing up. No shaking. No tears. They're escalating, she said. Good, he replied. So can we. The lawyer email arrived minutes later. This one sharper, edged with accusations. Unauthorized access. Fraud. Intent to prosecute. The mother forwarded it to the advocacy group without comment. They responded within the hour. This changes things, they said. By afternoon, the landlord's lawyer requested a call. Not demanded. Requested. On the call, the landlord didn't speak. That alone told them everything. The lawyer did most of the talking, outlining concerns, attempting to frame the situation as mutual misunderstanding, while carefully avoiding any mention of the rent increase itself. The father interrupted. Let's be clear, he said evenly. Your client raised our rent by 40% without justification. We responded. Everything after that is consequence. Silence. Then the lawyer sighed. My client is willing to rescind the increase. The mother leaned forward. In writing, and offer compensation for the inconvenience. Specify. Another pause. 3 months rent credit. The mother didn't smile. 6, she said, and the eviction notice withdrawn publicly. The lawyer hesitated. The father added quietly, or we proceed. Proceed meant more than court. It meant exposure. The lawyer cleared his throat. I'll speak to my client. The answer came an hour later. Agreed. The landlord never spoke to them again. The revised notice was posted in the building lobby the next day. An apology without a name, a correction without accountability. But everyone knew who it was for. 6 months, rent credit applied. Eviction withdrawn. The rent increase erased. But the reckoning didn't stop there. The advocacy group filed a formal complaint anyway. An investigation opened. Other tenants came forward. The landlord's business partners asked questions. Banks tightened oversight. The machine that once worked smoothly now required explanations at every turn. That evening, the family sat together on the couch, exhaustion settling into their bones like gravity. The kids sensed the shift without understanding the details. They laughed louder, leaned closer. The mother looked around the room. Same furniture, same walls, different power. They thought we'd break quietly, she said. The father nodded. They always do. Outside, the building stood as it always had, but something fundamental had changed. The silence was gone. The following morning, the sun rose over the neighborhood as if nothing had happened. But everything had. Inside the apartment, the family moved through their morning quietly, deliberately. Coffee steamed in mugs, toast snapped under knives, the smallest sounds of ordinary life echoing like victory. The kids argued over cereal boxes, unaware of the currents of consequence running beneath their feet. The father opened his laptop again, out of habit rather than need. His email inbox was calm. No threats. No frantic letters. No reminders of the 40% increase. Every pending message had been resolved. The 6 months rent credit appeared cleanly in their bank account. Each line item precise, untouchable. He let out a slow breath, one he hadn't realized he'd been holding. A laugh followed. Not loud, not triumphant, but deep and steady, the kind that carries weight because it has waited years for release. The mother glanced at him. She didn't need to say anything. The shift had settled between them, palpable. The kind of quiet understanding born from strategy executed perfectly, from patience maintained when the system tried to intimidate, and from knowing precisely when to move. The building outside seemed unchanged. Windows glimmered under the morning sun. Cars rolled down the street. Neighbors went about their routines. But the balance had shifted. The landlord's illusion of control had fractured. Every decision he'd once made assuming fear and obedience now demanded explanation. Systems that worked in his favor were scrutinized, audited, and monitored. Banks required transparency. Property managers were replaced. Internal oversight became unavoidable. For him, the realization arrived quietly, not with sirens or media exposure, but through the slow creep of inconvenience and accountability. Notifications pinged. Calls came. Questions were asked. Documentation demanded. Every corner of authority he thought untouchable was now tethered to proof, to precedent, to evidence he could not ignore. Meanwhile, the family reclaimed their mornings, evenings, and weekends. Life was ordinary in appearance, but charged with a subtle power that comes only when injustice has been countered without theatrics. Their conversations no longer carried a silent weight of anticipation or dread. The children laughed more freely, walked taller, and observed their parents with curiosity now tinged with respect. They felt the lesson, even if they didn't yet articulate it. Patience and preparation carry power, and injustice can be dismantled without shouting. By noon, other tenants began approaching them. Whispered thanks, subtle nods, quiet acknowledgement. They shared similar experiences, threats, sudden rent increases, dismissive management, but none had thought to act with the precision demonstrated by this family. The mother answered calmly, offering facts and dates, showing documentation only when requested. She didn't brag. She didn't boast. She just provided clarity. The ripple effect was visible. Neighbors compared notes. Tenants previously divided by silence began to communicate. Patterns emerged. Contradictions in previous notices, mismanaged records, unchecked practices. Everything was now visible under the light of accountability. Months passed. The landlord's properties were under constant review. Partners questioned decisions. Banks monitored accounts. His professional reputation became a ledger of errors and miscalculations he could not erase. Every attempt to assert unilateral control now met scrutiny, procedural checks, and the quiet vigilance of tenants who had once felt powerless. For the family, victory was quiet. No headlines, no viral videos, no public spectacle. But it was enduring. It lived in the corrected balances, the canceled increases, the knowledge that authority no longer acted unchecked. It was in the way neighbors now greeted them with respect, in the subtle reverence of their children, learning the value of strategy over panic. At night, the mother closed her laptop after reviewing the latest correspondence from the advocacy group. Screenshots, emails, legal documents, all neatly stored. The house was calm. The kids slept. The father sipped his late coffee, gaze fixed on the glowing city beyond the window. The mother leaned against the counter. "They thought they could scare us," she said quietly. The father nodded. "They always do. But fear only works if you let it." The mother allowed herself a faint smile. Not the warmth of relief, but the satisfaction of precision, patience, and victory. The lesson was complete, written not in loud words, but in consequences that could not be denied. Power assumes ignorance, but strategy exposes it. The landlord believed fear would guarantee obedience. He was wrong. Justice isn't always loud. It is delivered with preparation, patience, and evidence. Humiliation can be turned into leverage. Injustice can be dismantled quietly, deliberately, and irreversibly. The lesson for anyone underestimated, disrespected, or silenced. Patience and knowledge can turn a system built to oppress into one that enforces fairness. Courage is not always visible. It is the persistence to act when the world assumes you won't. This story is not about revenge. It is about recalibration. It is about showing that even when systems are stacked and people assume power is permanent, strategic action can restore balance. The landlord never saw it coming. By the time he realized control had slipped, the consequences had already cleared. Concrete, undeniable, final. Power is not taken by shouting. It is earned by understanding the rules, playing them carefully, and moving when the moment is right. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or quietly pressured, like this video to honor strategy over panic. Subscribe to Silent Struggle Studios for cinematic, raw stories where consequence meets preparation. Comment which county or city you're watching from. Your voice matters. Because systems only survive when silence persists. Because knowledge disrupts power. Because strategy, executed at the perfect moment, cannot be ignored.